Okay, guys, I know people are still logging in a little bit, but we're going to get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Montgomery with the California Association for Coordinated Transportation. I'm really happy to see so many people here this morning, and hopefully you're excited to hear our keynote speaker today. Also, don't forget to join us tonight for our networking session with the sponsor, where you can win fabulous prizes. And don't forget to play our game where you'll get prizes on Thursday afternoon. Setting up appointments with our sponsors and visiting our sponsors, you get a lot of extra points for that. So with that, I'm going to introduce Omar McPherson, who's with the San Luis Obispo Regional Transit Authority. He is the CALACT chair at the moment, and he is going to introduce our keynote speaker. Omar?
Thank you, Jackie. And welcome, everyone. Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to the CALACT Virtual Spring Conference. Thank you for joining us again for the second virtual conference. And we're hoping that we will be meeting in person in Monterey in October. The conference committee and CALACT staff have worked hard over the last month planning valuable training and talks to interact with our sponsors and networking opportunities with our peers and during some of the social events. We appreciate all the support from our sponsors, speakers, and attendees that makes this conference possible. I want to take a few minutes to thank all of our sponsors for their contribution to the conference. We first start off with our platinum sponsor, which is TransDev, our gold sponsor, A through Z bus sales, BYD, Caltrans, Connections, First Transit, National Express, Proterra, Qstron, Shorelock, Swiftly. Next slide. Bronze sponsors, Creative Bus Sales, Freeman Seating, MV Transportation, REI, Route Match by Uber, Shickley Bus and Van Sales, and Ultra Transfloor. And now I want to introduce our keynote speaker, Toks Omishakin. Toks was appointed the director of California Department of Transportation by Governor Newsom in 2019. He managed a $15 million budget and nearly 21,000 employees who oversees 50,000 lane miles of highway, maintain 13,000 bridges, permit more than 400 public use airports, fund three of Amtrak's busiest interstate rail services, and support more than 200 transit agencies. Previously, he spent 8 years as the deputy commissioner with the Tennessee Department of Transportation and served in the Nashville mayor's office. Omishakin is a chair of the Active Transportation Council for the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, and is an American Walks board member. A Tennessee native, Omishakin and his wife has 2 children. He is completing a PhD in engineering management at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. He has a master's degrees in urban and regional planning from Jackson State University and a bachelor's of art in engineering technology from Mississippi Valley State University. Without further ado, I want to welcome our keynote speaker, Toks Omishakin.
Good morning. Can you see me and hear me clearly? Can everybody see me?
Perfectly, Toks, you're good to go.
Okay, good. I can't see myself or my slides yet. Okay, there they go.
Yeah.
I don't think I've used this platform before. An excellent morning to everybody. Thanks for joining this year's conference, and thanks for inviting Caltrans to be a part of the CALACT conference as well. I'm excited to share a little bit about some of the things that are going on in the department, some of the things that we're focused on, that we are locked into and trying to achieve for the state. So thanks for that introduction, Omar. I appreciate everything that you do in your space for transportation and livable communities, healthy communities in general. So, I mentioned the fact that I'm excited to be a part of the CALACT and all the work that you do for transit and mobility. But in large part, I'm really more excited just about the period that we're in today, what we're fortunate to have in front of us. We've gone through a tumultuous last 14 or 15 months, a little over a year now, with the pandemic and the economic impact and the impacts of climate change, specifically in the state. And then yesterday, we saw the outcome of a case that a lot of us were paying attention to see what would happen as it relates to what we think is just, and whether or not justice will be carried out in a way that we expect it to be carried out. And I'm not going to delve into that at all this morning, but what this brings to mind, what our discussion here brings to mind, is the fact that so many things have happened around us, and in our own respective places, we have an opportunity in front of us, in this case, transportation, to transform not only today, but leave a lasting legacy for generations to come through the work that we do. And I'm hoping just to share a little bit of what that potentially looks like through the work that we are doing at Caltrans. But with the federal government now saying the America Jobs Plan that's been proposed by President Biden and Secretary Buttigieg and other secretaries, with $2 trillion being proposed to spend on infrastructure, you can't help but get excited about the period that we're in. And not just about the money, but the priorities that are being laid out, that this administration is saying we care about, and we know communities across the country care about. For example, a proposed $20 or $25 billion investment in reconnecting communities that have been divided by highways, $20 billion on safety, up to nearly $20 billion being proposed for active transportation, money being set aside for climate action, more money being spent on transit, being proposed rather, not spent yet, being proposed for transit, the work that many of you in this meeting do, than even being proposed for highway expansion or highway maintenance, period. So more money is being proposed for transit than altogether, rail and bus transit, than is being proposed for highway expansion or highway maintenance. So truly a unique time and an exciting time to be a part of what will be a pivot in transportation, I believe, and will leave a better lasting legacy for generations to come if we're able to deliver on what is being laid out in front of us. So next slide. So at Caltrans, here's how we're looking to accomplish some of these things. And I'm very proud of the Caltrans team, the leadership team, and our staff, because they have been focused on a lot of what the federal government is now talking about doing, the conversation nationally. They have been focused on it for the last several months. They've been pushing us in this direction, nevertheless. And part of how I know this, and you should be proud of this as well, is because we just finalized our long-range plan that sets forth a 30-year outlook for how we're going to plan and invest in transportation in the state. And this plan we released last month, actually in February, so 2 months ago, we released. It has several key elements that I just mentioned already. If you click the next button, I think those things may come up. Yeah, so it has 8 goals that some of these things I mentioned already: safety, climate, equity, improving quality of life and public health, the environment, infrastructure. All these things, again, are ahead of where many parts of the country are on this already. And we are setting the stage. We're setting the tone for the rest of the country in our aggressiveness and our focus on these issues. I'm really proud and excited about this work to come. What I will tell you that's unique about this long range plan and the 8 goals you see here, and it probably jumps out immediately to you, is I guess that would be the 3rd and 4th bullet on this list. And actually, maybe you could even say the 6th bullet as well. The fact that we are, as a DOT, we're explicitly calling out, and we were doing this before, by the way, a lot of the focus on these issues right now. The fact that we're specifically calling out climate action, the need to address climate, the need to address equity, our impact on public health, is something that, again, is really good to see for us. I'm excited that we're in this place. Traditionally, and I've been around this business now for nearly 20 years, you just don't see state DOTs especially saying that we understand the role that we play in the public's health, and the focus on equity and climate, again, are things that traditionally you don't see, and we're embracing a focus on this unlike we've ever have before. Next slide. So not only is our long-range plan, which is focused on the investment for the state, not only is that embracing those priorities that you saw, so is our strategic plan. And the strategic plan, if you're not familiar with this or haven't been a part of one before, it's more internally focused on how the department itself will run and focus internally on the work product that it's looking to create, how the staff, the administration will work on issues internally within the department. And it's a 4-year plan, as you see here. And if you click the next button, similar outcomes, very much in alignment. They dovetail off of one another, with safety being the biggest focus, not only safety for the moving public, but safety for our internal team as well. And again, some of the things that I mentioned are part of our mission, values, and goals for the department. We want to lead on climate action as a state Department of Transportation. We want to advance, as you see at the bottom there, we want to advance equity and livability in all communities. And so this is where, again, we've set up a new vision statement, a new mission statement. We're embracing new values, new goals for the department. And these are the main goals that come from that plan. So again, very much in alignment and dovetails very well with the overall external product that we will be providing for communities as we look to improve the state's transportation system. Next slide. So I've mentioned how important equity is. It's now a part of our first time ever, part of our strategic plan, first time ever, part of our long range plan. But living equity and equity not just being a talking point is something that's not going to be easy. It's become the sort of buzzword of the year. And I think a lot of us are figuring out in our respective places of work what does this mean for us? And again, very proud of our team here at Caltrans. Our leadership team has been so locked into this issue, especially since roughly this time last year, when the incidents happened in Minnesota with George Floyd. And I mentioned that the results of the trial, the verdict yesterday. But we said, look, we want to take care of home base. We want to take care of the home front internally before we start to go to the people we serve in the state and address how we can do a better job and be more equitable in our work. We said we want to focus internally. So we decided to have conversations about equity, what you see here. And we held 5 internal staff-wide, statewide discussions about equity throughout the summer and fall of last year. And you got to keep in mind, our department is a department of 22,000 people. And depending on where you live in the state, depending on your upbringing, people are at different places really on this issue. But we said, we can't grow in this without having discussions ourselves. And the panel that you see here, the participants joined me, and including Tamika Butler, who many of you may know, who's a major activist for equity issues in our state and nationally. She's a good friend of mine. She joined us to have a discussion, a very big discussion about equity within the department. But for us to get to the place where we believe we need to get to, we need to start internally within the department, and we've been doing that for the last year. Next slide. But to get there, to get to the place we want to get to, we said we needed a framework to guide our work. Because a lot of times what we tend to do on initiatives and ideas and concepts like this is say, okay, yeah, we're just going to do this, and that hits on equity. But we said we needed a framework, and we needed to put metrics behind the framework to actually ensure that we were being accountable in our efforts to move forward on this issue. But before the framework, there were some important steps that we were taking within the department. I'll say one of the first important steps was we released an equity statement that addressed the fact that we know, and understand the impact that the transportation system, that our work has had on communities across the state. And so we said we recognize that harm that may have been created in some cases, and we are going to do better moving forward. And in that equity statement, this framework that you see of these 4 Ps were outlined. But some other important things I'll say quickly that we did, more internally focused, as we're going to eventually start to get to the place where we want to get to. We elevated the position of the Civil Rights Director office. It was an assistant director position. It was elevated to a deputy director position that reports directly to me, oversees a nearly $400 million business DBE program. So elevated that position, hired a new person to be over it. We created a new office called the CORE, the CalTrans Office of Race and Equity. That office is going to be focused mostly on engagement within the department and externally as well. When I say within the department, I mean, there are several parts of Caltrans. There are 12 districts within Caltrans and across the entire geography of the state. And like I mentioned before, there's some people who are not necessarily there, so to speak, on this issue. And there's a lot of training that needs to happen and more discussions that need to be held beyond the 5 discussions that we held last summer and the last fall. And so that core office, the Caltrans Office of Race and Equity, will be helping to engage our staff as we look to do a better job on this front. and engagement with the public as well. So that's what that core office will be doing. But specifically to the 4 Ps on equity, and then we'll keep moving. People, the people part of the 4 Ps. This means that the hiring, the promoting, the training that we will be doing at Caltrans, we want to make sure that we are truly giving opportunity to people regardless of race, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of gender, that we want to truly lift up people who have been, marginalized in many cases. And we want a workforce that truly reflects the people that we serve across the state. It's one of the most diverse states in the country. And our workforce, regardless of where you look, whether it be the rank and file, the entry-level positions, all the way up to middle management, executive management, we should try our best to give opportunity to people that reflect this very diverse state. So that's the people piece. Projects and programs. This is part of what I mentioned before, the fact that we've built so many projects in the state without a lot of consideration for marginalized and underserved communities. And we know that history now more than ever. Some people were not aware of this, but we know that history now. We're clear on that history. Moving forward, we're going to do better. Our projects, the programs that we have are going to provide uplift to communities intentionally, especially communities that have been marginalized and underserved for so many years. We're going to go out with that intention to listen to communities, engage communities like never before, and provide uplift and opportunity through the programs and the projects that we do. The partnership piece is about making sure that the vast amount of resources we have within the department, especially financial resources that we have, that we make sure that people get a true shot to be a part of those resources with us. For example, I mentioned the DBE program that we oversee. It's roughly $370 million annually. Not only do we have the DBE program, that's a state program. The DBE program is a federal program. We also have a state small business program within Caltrans. That's a $1.2 billion spending roughly annually. And we want to make sure that whether it be a Latino business, an African-American business, by the way, those two demographics are the least or the most underrepresented in our small businesses and our DBE program, that we're given an opportunity to those demographics to grow their business and get resources from Caltrans in doing that. So that's the partnership P. And finally, the planet P. I think it's pretty common knowledge now as well that when you look at those negative impacts that we've had with some of the projects we've built in communities, those same communities have also taken on the hardest hit when it comes to their environment, when it comes to climate, when it comes to water resources. And so through our projects, again, making sure that we are doing it through a sustainable lens to provide, again, uplift through that work in those communities that have been overlooked and underserved for so many years. Next slide. So equity, as you can see, is a core foundational principle for us in the work that we do. It's not going to be a talking point by any means. It's going to be something that is a living point for us. But we also have 5 priorities that from the onset, since I've landed here at Caltrans, that we've been focused on. And it's these 5 priorities. I will tell you that they guided our work through some of the most tumultuous period that any of us have been through. I think without this guide, without this set of priorities, we would have really struggled through the pandemic to be locked in, but we were focused and locked in on these priorities. And we know now, as we come off the back end of the pandemic, that many of these things that we outlined in 2019, at the end of 2019 as priorities, were more important than ever through the pandemic. As we rebound, they're going to play even just an important role. So let's go through these real quickly, and I think I have a few more slides after that, and we'll love to get to Q&A. So next slide. So number 1 is safety. This by far is our most important calling card. This is, you know, when we're said and done, when we leave the department, many of the leaders that are in the department today, my hope is that when we look back, we would have left in place policies, an infrastructure system that is setting us up to drastically reduce the number of fatalities, the number of serious injuries, and the number of crashes on our transportation system. Where we're at today, I think many of you probably know. If you don't know, 10 people die. 10 people every single day on the state's transportation system. Out of that 10, nearly 3 are the most vulnerable users of the system, people who are walking and biking and trying to get access to transit. This is an area where we need a lot of work. And to that end, it's been a core focus for us. One of the first hires that I made when I started in this role was a chief safety officer, Rachel Carpenter. Rachel, this is what she does every single day. She has an entire team, an entire office that is focused on this, on this issue. I believe we can get to 0 deaths. I really do believe that. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take, of course, many, many years. But it's not something that is just a lofty idea and goal out there that can't be achieved. And here's part of why I believe that. There are actually examples of communities that have done this already. When you look at England, England has a population of 56 million people. 56 million. California's population is 40 million. England has half the number of deaths, 1,700 roughly, to the 3,600 that we have annually, fatalities in California. You drop a little bit lower to a little bit more of a micro scale. There are cities in England, not in England, but the UK rather, in the EU, like Helsinki and Oslo, that have gone from 60 to 80, pedestrian fatalities in these cities to 0 in 2019. They did this, and it remains to be seen whether or not they will have achieved that in 2020 as well. But Helsinki and Oslo were able to do this. They went from several dozens and dozens of fatalities every year to 0. And part of the way they were able to do this was a focus on a safe systems approach to addressing transportation. And we can talk about that, what that means exactly later, but this is not a lofty aspirational goal. This is something that takes a lot of focus, will take addressing mobility issues, will take a more keen focus on technology and the role that technology plays. But I believe that in many years to come, we can get there. But the work starts now to start to see that decline happen. Next slide. And part of this work, we know that we, again, I like to say we have to take care of home base. And for us, that means taking care of our staff, that vast staff that I mentioned before. And in doing this, we have to make our work zones safer. We have hundreds and hundreds of work zones going on across, probably in the thousands, or rather actually work zones across the state. And we've had some unfortunate incidents happen. To date, there are 189 Caltrans workers. Hopefully none ever again, is the hope. But 189 Caltrans workers have died in the line of duty while doing work for Caltrans. And likely, don't know the exact number, but likely hundreds and hundreds of contractors as well. Just in the fall of last year, we lost 5 contractors doing work on Caltrans projects, just in the fall of last year. They were hit when errant vehicles ran off the road and hit them while they were doing work for us. But to humanize this, a couple of years ago, we started a campaign to latch on to the Move Over campaign to alert people that whenever you see flashing amber lights ahead, it means to move over. This lady here, and I think that's her grandson. We have workers like this across the state that are a part of this ad, and we're going to do even more in this coming year to get the word out about safety and the importance of not only safety across the entire system, but very specifically our work zones as well. By the way, before I move on from safety, we know, I think, again, more than ever, what some of the culprits are for why we're struggling with this issue. And it's no doubt, number one, it's speed. And number two is distracted driving. And probably number three is still somehow a connection to some form of a DUI. Look, the numbers that we have out there today that we're seeing for 2020 is that there's a likely 5% increase in automobile fatalities. And there's also a 5% increase in pedestrian fatalities. You heard that number 5% and you probably think, well, that's not that high, that's not that much. But you break it down, 5% of 3,700, you're talking about, possibly, 200 people. In addition, died in 2020 than in 2019. And the reason why that's, beyond the fact that it's 200 people, the reason why that's startling is because VMT dropped in this country, I think in the entire country by estimates in 2020, in some cases up to 40%. I think the national average supposedly is roughly 15%. The numbers are a little bit all over the place, but you get a 30 to 40% decrease in the amount of people who made a vehicle trip, but the amount of fatalities go up 5% in multiple modes. You got a problem. And clearly where you can latch that problem, where you can connect that problem to, it's the way we're driving, the speeds that we're driving at. There were, at some point in 2020, there was an 87% increase in violations that CHP pulled people over for in the 100-mile-an-hour over range. So 87% increase in the people that were being ticketed for going 100 miles an hour and more. We just turned our transportation system into a racetrack. And we know what the results, again, have ended up looking like for some people, unfortunately, in this state. Next slide. So I'll go through the rest of these rather quickly so we can get to Q&A. Modality, this is another major focus for us. Is one of the main reasons why I got really excited about coming to California, because you have a governor and Governor Newsom who said he was going to be committed to making the state as and its in many elements as sustainable and green as possible. And the way to get there is by not just focusing on expanding the pavement and expanding the transportation system through adding more lanes to infrastructure, but making that system as robust and diverse as possible, which means investment in bus transit, rail transit, walking, biking, and even looking at how freight moves in a better way as well, through water, through rail, and not just a system that is solely dependent on movement through single occupancy vehicles on the highway system. So this has been a key focus for us, shifting policy, shifting funding to align with this direction even more. Next slide. I mentioned the fact that we need to get in this direction of making the system more climate friendly, more sustainable. The way to do that, I mentioned how important mobility is and investment in other modes. But many of you may have seen this graphic before in a different form, but let there be no doubt that the biggest culprit for the environmental challenges that we face in this state is the transportation sector. Leave no doubt about that. 41% 41% of the GHG emissions in the state come from the transportation sector, with the industrial sector being a very far second at 24%. If you look at the same graphic for the country, for the United States, transportation is at 29%. It's still number one nationally. It's at 29%, and the industry or industrial sector is at 26%. And the pie chart looks very different from this because there's a little bit more, the sectors have, a little bit more equal involvement in their impact on the environment. But in California, it's far out there. And so what that clearly shows us is that the dependence on the single occupancy vehicle and the way we drive, and we drive long distances. We have so many super commuters that are spending an hour and a half to 2 hours to get to a destination one way, that has to change. Mobility, improving mobility choices and opportunities through our modality is the way to get there. Next slide. Mentioned the governor already, but he is so committed to this issue. A large part of his focus as well, not only is making sure that we as a department and all the departments like CTC and CalSTA are shifting their focus to a more modal transportation system, but also the investment in electrifying the transportation system as well. But not only providing infrastructure, and we're doing that as well, charging infrastructure, we're starting to put it in so many different parts of the state. In SoCal, we recently announced more investment in this area, but specifically, much kudos to the governor. 2 executive orders, all during Climate Week in 2019. N1919 came out with the goal of 5 million zero emission vehicles by 2030. And also in Climate Week of 2020, N7920 came out, and with a focus to get every single new car produced and passenger truck produced in the state to be zero emission, to be a ZEV by the year 2035. Those are huge goals. We're only 14 years away from that, if you can imagine that. But those are goals that are definitely driving and pushing the industry and pushing us as well as a state DOT. Next slide. Talked about this already, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but again, the way to get there, to have a more multimodal system, is by the policies, by the actions that we take, and by the resources that we put towards modalism in the state. And there are so many programs right now that either the CTC has or that we have at Caltrans that is increasing investment in the multimodal system of the state. So excited about the direction we're going. We got a lot of work to do, but we're making the right policy and investment decisions, I think, to get there. Next slide. Another key component of improving the modality of the state is managed, no doubt, managed lanes, because we know it helps us achieve many of the things that I mentioned before. Not only does it help us with potentially addressing environmental and climate issues, but has an impact on helping us manage congestion, increasing people throughput, providing, again, multimodal access, specifically improving bus access. Bus access will be important as we look to grow managed lanes, ride sharing, and again, overall mobility and improvement. Caltrans historically has not played a major role in managed lanes and in our planning and building managed lanes, but we're stepping up here. We're engaged more than we have before with the self-help counties across the state. And we ourselves, we're taking on planning efforts more in this area because it's going to be so important to this transportation network, because it is the system that you see today is largely built out already. There's not going to be, there are not going to be hundreds of more projects to add lanes to the transportation network. So we have to continue to optimize the system that exists today. And part of the way to get that optimization is through, I believe, managed lanes, utilizing managed lanes, and connecting that system of managed lanes throughout regions and the entire state. So that's going to be something that we're increasing our focus on in the coming months and years. Next slide. Innovation as a fourth priority here. I like to call us the innovation capital of the world. California is just that. And we as a department have to embrace innovation more. And I think we're doing that. There's some projects that we've taken on, really unique projects we've taken on recently that are in line with this outlook. But when you have everybody from Tesla to Google to Lyft and Uber, all these major technology companies, and notice I call them technology companies, not mobility companies. When you have them in your backyard, we as the State Department of Transportation have to operate with that same kind of mindset of, look, these private entities are right here in our state, and this is how they're changing the world. How can we as well, in the work that we do, change mobility and livability for people in the state? And it's something, this innovation is something that's hard to measure, because it's not always about, creating this new multi-million-dollar product for the department, but it could be as simple as processes within the department, but just having that spirit of encouraging innovation, testing things out, using pilots to advance this work. It's something that we're trying to build a culture of within the department. Next slide. An example of this quickly is the CALITP project. The CALITP project is, if you're not familiar with it, is something that we initiated here, some of our transit staff. It's looking to connect all these various modes of mobility or modes of transportation, I should say, in the state. when you think about it, we have more than 300 transit agencies in the state of California. That's a lot. That's a ton. And we have these micro mobility systems. We got rail. We have so many different ways for people to get about. And if you look on the left side of the screen, just a handful of everybody's version of some kind of card or pass you need. And so this CALITP program is looking to connect these various modes and systems to make it easier to have contactless pay and make utilization of these different transportation systems to make those choices easier and simpler for people to use. It's ongoing. There should be some announcements in the next coming months of some transit agencies that we're working with. Some exciting news coming forth on this front, but CALITP, just an example of innovation coming from the department. Next slide. Last one, or second to last here, efficiency. Again, we're the budget was mentioned earlier, we're a nearly $16 billion agency. And I think sometimes when you have purses of that size, you feel like you can rest on your laurels and just do business as you want to do it. But the people of this state, I think the very least that they expect from us, expect of us, is that we're going to be judicial, that we're going to be prudent with the resources that we're given. And that means from field work coming up with new ways to transfer information and data to save time and money, to be efficient in that way, to the way we actually deliver the projects themselves, the products that we deliver, the processes that we use. They expect us to identify efficiencies within that. SB1 is 4 years old this month, and it gave Caltrans and the entire state, it gave Caltrans $2.6 billion, but the entire state $5.1 billion. And in doing and spending that money for people as taxes were increased, this is these are the things that people rightfully expect that we can make happen as we deliver the transportation projects for them. So next slide. Part of, I mentioned this already, but it's a little over a $5 billion investment from SB1. We split that money equally between the state and local government. A lot of credit due to the legislators and the administration and Caltrans staff who worked on it, because in that $5 billion increased revenue, 900 million was set aside to address specifically other modes, dedicated specifically to other modes. And transit is a big part of that 900 million, 750 million, 100 million to bike ped, and 25 million to local planning grants that lead to those transit and bicycle and pedestrian projects. So much kudos to that foresight. I would argue more could probably be set aside, but definitely for the time that this was done, this is groundbreaking, absolutely groundbreaking that this kind of foresight was put into SB1. Next slide. And a part of what came out of SB1 as well in this efficiencies is the fact that there's in legislation a requirement for us to identify $100 million in efficiencies every year, in efficiencies or savings every year. And every year since, Caltrans, again, you should be proud that Caltrans has achieved just that. In 2017, 123 million, up to last year, we tripled the amount that was being asked of us to identify efficiencies or quote unquote savings through the work that we were delivering. So much kudos to our team for the way this work is being done. Next slide. Finally, the the last priority of the 5 priorities, partnerships. Now, working with organizations like yours, like CALACT, it's something that we believe in our department that if we're going to get to the place where we want to get to, where we're truly having equitable outcomes, that we're creating a brighter future for all Californians, we believe it has to be done through a partnership. Organizations like ours have a tendency to do its great work, nevertheless, do that great work in a vacuum, and not feel or approach the work by engaging as many stakeholders as possible, whether it be a private entity or other public entity or a trade organization and NGOs. But we're embracing this belief more than ever that stakeholder engagement, that creating partnerships is what's going to help us truly deliver what we believe are transformative projects that leave a lasting legacy of sustainability and a high quality of life for people. And so that's a core focus for us, and very much connected to obviously the equity work, the more equitable approach that we're going to use as well. Next slide. So that's it. I like to usually close with one slide. I forgot to tell staff to put it in here. And just quickly, that slide has an image of President Kennedy giving an address to Congress exactly 60 years ago, in 1961, and an address to Congress. President Kennedy mentioned the fact that the work of building a transportation system and focusing on building highways is vital. That work, he said, was vital. Building, a great highway system. And he was saying this because President Eisenhower, his predecessor, had just started us down the journey of building this massive highway transportation system we have today. He said, that work is vital, but let's not forget about mass transportation. President Kennedy said, let's not forget about mass transportation. And let's not forget that planning for transportation goes hand in hand with planning for land use development. And he said, transportation and land use are 2 inseparable aspects of the same process. And he said this 60 years ago. Now, if you see the excerpts of the speech, you would think this is something that the current president said, or the current Secretary of Transportation, or whoever. 60 years ago, he was saying mass transit, land use, transportation, hand in hand, 2 inseparable aspects of the same process. We should keep in mind that this work is a work of a lifetime. It's a work of a lifetime. We don't get a chance, I think, in my opinion, we don't get a chance to wave a flag and say, mission accomplished. It's an ongoing effort. We celebrate the victories along the way, the small victories, the big victories, but let's not rest on our laurels. The president was saying that 60 years ago. It's a reminder that this good fight that many of us are fighting for a more equitable and climate just transportation system is a battle of a lifetime. It's a fight of a lifetime. So let's continue that work together. Thanks for letting Caltrans be a part of this discussion this morning and the partnership that we have together and that we will continue to build. Thank you very much. I would love to take a few questions. I may have to run a little early, running behind on another appointment, but I would love to take 4 or 5 quick questions. Thank you.
Okay, Toks, thanks for that presentation. That was very informative. We have a few questions that we have from the audience. I'm gonna start off with a 2-part question. California has drastically different topography than the UK. Are you trying to approach the topic of safety on a district level or just the state level? That's first part of the question. And then the second part, is there a plan on how to prioritize rural roads versus urban highways?
Rural roads from a safety standpoint, or does that question go further than that? Prioritize rural roads in what sense?
I think that just says how is there a plan on how to prioritize the rural roads versus urban highways?
Okay, I'll try to address that a little bit. Not exactly clear on what that prioritization means, but the first part of your question, I think the person with the question is spot on. The fact is, I mentioned 56 million people in England, 40 million people in California. There's a little bit of apples and oranges in that. The fact that England is probably, in square mileage, if you look at it, it's probably a third of the size of California, believe it or not. That's a little surprising to think of, but if you pick up the map of England and you drop it on California, it's probably will just cover Northern California, where we are today, and not even hit the middle or south, or the Central Valley or the south. So it's much more dense, is the point. But I don't think that excuses us from still looking to see how we can get better outcomes for people who use the transportation system in the state. The fact that they have 1,700 fatalities is because, one, their VMT is probably less, but they also have a system that's not built for speed, for people flying all over the place, and more people use other modes to get to destinations. So there's so many things that we can copy or try to duplicate or try to borrow from them that I just mentioned. Making sure people have more options to get about, making sure that our system is not just focused on getting people to destinations as fast as possible and then constantly encourages speed, are some of the things that I believe we can take from the successes that they've had. And to the other part of that question about state level versus district level, very much my general perspective I mentioned is from the state level, but to get there, we're going to need all 12 districts, no doubt, and the 12 district directors. And to that end, each district, we're undergoing a process now. We will actually start within the next 2 months, where each district is going to have a safety plan, where they're going to identify where the biggest challenges are in each district and what types of projects and solutions we'll be able to focus on to address those safety challenges in each one of the 12 districts. So that process is going to commence in the next 2 months. So very good question. On the last part of the question about prioritizing rural roads versus urban, I'm not sure exactly where
and that was from a safety standpoint as well too.
Okay, from a safety standpoint. What we tend to see in the rural areas, thanks for clarifying the question, Omar. What we tend to see in the rural areas, no doubt, is more crashes that are like head-on crashes, a lot of more speed-related crashes. And so we're going to address those as we work through the district plans. Obviously, some districts are more rural than others. And when we go through this district-focused safety plan, we will see the results of just what I just said. They tend not to have the higher incidences of cycling and pedestrian fatalities. And so we'll balance all those things out as we look to create projects and investments through those district-wide safety plans. But very good question. Next one.
Okay. Where do you see zero emission transportation going in relation to commercial trucking, transit buses, and autos? And it's a battery and hydrogen.
That's an interesting question. I think the trucking industry, plays is going to play a big role in what we're going to see from a safety standpoint moving forward. We don't talk about it as much, but the freight industry plays a big role. There's so many incidents that are secondary incidents that happen based on something that happens, and there's data to support this. When a truck, a major tractor trailer or something breaks down, the secondary incident impacts are usually pretty significant. So the trucking industry is gonna how we address that is gonna be very important as we move forward. What was the other part of that question, Omar, apart from trucking?
It's transit buses and autos, probably just regular cars. And
yeah, from a transit standpoint, buses and rail transit, if you look at the data, obviously are much more safer than being in the car. The track record is just there. The number of incidents are much fewer, and probably it's because there are not as many transit trips as they are single occupancy vehicle trips. So maybe not a fair comparison between the two, but I think the more we're able to get people to use transit, bus and rail, and specifically buses, because buses are more flexible for people, the more we're able to do that, I think the safer the system becomes, because you're pulling more people off of the out of single occupancy vehicles potentially. So good question. Next one.
There's a follow-up to that same question.
Okay.
What is the sustainability currently associated with the battery electric and hydrogen fuel source industry? Is there the capacity for all transit agency to transition to those fuel types? It's a safety point.
Yeah, it sounds like multiple issues are being put into that one question.
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly where that's going, but part of the question is, will more transit agencies have the opportunity to shift their technology from combustion engine to other alternative energy types like hydrogen fuel and electric? I say without a doubt, yes. We're, as a state, Caltrans, CalSTA, CTC, through our programs, we're going to invest in this more. So if you're looking for those opportunities, there are different programs that we have, solutions for congested corridors, or the TERSIT program. All these programs, we're going to be looking to invest more in alternative energy efforts and programs for transit, and the federal government as well. I know most of the new leadership at the US DOT. I've worked with them and I've known many of them for years. And if you look at some of the policies and the NOFOs, I mean, the funding opportunities that are coming out, they're signaling very much that along the lines of this question, alternative energy sources, excuse me, are going to be very important for the different modes of transportation moving forward, specifically even transit and bus transit specifically. So yes, on a safety front, I'm not sure what the tie-in that is being made there, but to whether or not it's safer to use alternative energy sources for buses, I'm not sure on that. I don't know what the connection is to that in safety, but definitely that energy source it's going to be embraced more by us at the state, and for sure at the federal level as well. Thank you.
I got another one. Will Caltrans propose policies for increasing multimodalism in California be a part of the CMU TCD as to bring a greater level of parity equity between modes of transportation?
Wow. Let me see if I can decipher what exactly that question means. I'm not completely sure I understand it, but they're referring to the CMUTCD, the California Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices.
Yeah.
And whether or not the policies that we have will encourage multimodal investment. I think I understand the question. So in general, what I can tell you is the California MUTCD, once the FHWA MUTCD is finalized, and there's a lot of discussion nationally about the FHWA or USDOT MUTCD right now. There's a lot of discussion about it's going through an update. A lot of people are pushing for Secretary Buttigieg to completely do away with the current MUTCD and start afresh, or make significant adjustments to the one that's currently out for comment now. Whenever that's finalized, we will make adjustments to the California, the CMUTCD. We will make adjustments to comply, to be in alignment with the federal MUTCD. But beyond the MUTCD, because for those of you who are not familiar with it, the MUTCD is not, it's not a design document. It's a manual that says, here's how you should put up signs for cars, for pedestrians, for buses. Here's how you should handle lane striping on the transportation system. It's more about signage, and it's more about the layout of markings and so forth. So it's not a design document. A lot of people confuse that. But I think it's just one of several things that we at Caltrans, as a part of the state transportation family, that we have influence over. And I always tell people, there are 3 ways to know something is a priority for you. Whatever it is in your life, personal life, your business, or whatever, the actions you take, the policies that you set up towards it, and the resources that you put towards it. So for us, if you look at our track record for many years, but especially in my short tenure of a year and a half, you look at the actions we're taking, you look at the policy decisions we're making, where we're aligning our resources. It's along the lines of increasing mobility for all modes, and specifically addressing the active transportation and the transit, the need for transit growth across the state. So it's a long way to answer your question, but I hopefully did a little bit of justice.
Okay, thanks for that. We have one more question. It's a long one, so bear with me for a second. How will CA GHG gas emissions be measured once private automobiles move over to ZEB, but the supply chain of mining materials for ZEB still creates CO2 emissions? Shouldn't the focus be getting cars off the road rather than replacing one type of vehicles with another? Has Caltrans seen changes from the implementation of SB 743 and the focus on environmental impact of VMT?
Wow. Yeah, somebody's got a very astute mind for these issues.
Yes.
That's a long question, and it'd probably take me a long time to answer it, but let me give you a little bit of my perspective on it. To the former point, and then the latter point later. To the former point, I completely agree that we can't just focus on making the transportation fleet as ZEV as possible. That can't just be the focus if we're looking to address GHG. Hence, the latter part of your question about SB 743, which is we're looking to reduce VMT. I think they go hand in hand. I really do. The easier target, no doubt, is working with the OEMs to say, all right, turn your fleet over. In a decade and 15 years, you need to move from ICE vehicles, from internal combustion engine vehicles to ZEV. To me, that's easier, especially if the OEMs see a bottom line that's profitable for them in some kind of way. If they see that, they're going to start to make the adjustments. And you see that already. A lot of the OEMs have already outlined a time and a date. But we in the public space and many of the transit agencies who are on right now, I would consider you public entities, though you may disagree with me. I think I would say you're providing the public service. I think it's incumbent upon us to continue to grow our side of the work, grow our side of the business. Because if we just focus on ZEV, on zero emission vehicles, and we don't focus on mobility options, we're still going to have the same congestion. We're still going to have people sitting in traffic for an hour and a half going one way. Addressing electrification doesn't improve livability in the sense of how we live and interact with one another. ZEV doesn't do that. ZEV, no doubt, does directly increase that emission source. There's no doubt about that. And we, as the fleet turns over more and more, it's now 9%. ZEVs are now 9% of the vehicles purchased in their state. So in 2020, it was roughly 9.3%, which is significant. We're at nearly 10% of the vehicles purchased in the state being zero emission. So we're heading in the right direction, but it's not a magic bullet. It's not going to bring a panacea of solutions to our lives and to the work we do. We no doubt have to continue to focus on the overall mobility part. Now, to the other part of the question, lastly, SB 743, the law was passed in 2013, I believe. So we're 8 years into the law being passed. But it was set up for a lot of engagement and public work to be done to get us to a place where it's being fully implemented. We're finally at the early stage, if you will, of implementation, because it's such a complex law, it's such a complex bill that I don't think in 2013 anybody felt like, oh yeah, SB 743 passed, it starts today. So we're 8 years in. So I don't think we're at the point now where we can say, oh yeah, it's shown all this reduction in VMT or the way land use is developing, because there's a land use component to this as well. It's not just about vehicles. But I think as we start to implement it and local governments are implementing and the state is, I think it will yield that. It will yield a reduction in VMT if we continue to do our part in making sure that the system is there to provide choices in alignment with the projects that we continue to build. I think we'll get there. We're not there yet, though. We're not at a place where we can say, oh, SB 743 has now resulted in this much VMT reduction or this much more significant, compact, non-sprawl development. We're not there yet, but there's a lot of hope riding on California because nationally people are looking to us as the leaders in this space. So in the years to come, in a couple of years, that question will become more important than ever to ask. So very good question.
Well, that was all the questions that we have for you, Toks, and I want to thank you on behalf of the CALACT membership and the CALACT organization for that informative speech and presentation, and giving us the time to ask questions and for you to answer them. We really do appreciate that, and thanks for your time again.
Thanks a lot, Omar. Good to be with everybody this year. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Take care.
We have one last part of this. Lastly, I hope you will enjoy this short video from our coffee sponsors, A through Z bus sales. And do not forget to thank your A through Z representative for the Starbucks gift card.
Who is A to Z Bus Sales? Take a journey with us and learn how a little used bus dealership founded in a dusty gravel lot in a small Arizona town has become one of the largest bus dealer groups on the West Coast. In 1976, founder George Tillery started Arizona Bus Sales, selling used school buses and later a mix of shuttles and motor coaches. In 1984, A to Z expanded to Ontario, California, in pursuit of becoming the state's Bluebird distributor. In 1987, that dream became reality, and A to Z moved into its current 10-acre headquarters in Colton, California, which houses new and pre-owned bus sales, parts, service, and a full body and paint facility. In 1994, A to Z expanded yet again, this time to Sacramento, California, into a second 10-acre state-of-the-art dealership. Also in 1994, A to Z Bus Sales joined the California Association for Coordinated Transportation, otherwise known as CALACT, the largest state transit association in the United States. 1 year later, in 1995, A to Z Bus Sales branched out once again and established a third location on the island of Oahu, Hawaii. In 1999, our founder did something very special for the employees who helped him build A to Z into what it was and is today. He started an employee stock ownership plan, or ESOP, to give the employees an opportunity to own shares in the company they created. In 2018, A to Z Bus began a journey with its partners that would shape the future of who we are today, delivering more electric school and shuttle buses combined than any dealer in the US. But we are far more than just a bus dealership. We're a culture of like-minded individuals bonded together by a set of core values that sets us apart from any other business in the industry.
We serve God by serving others.
We stand for customer service excellence.
We exercise extreme ownership.
We build open and honest relationships.
Respect for the individual.
Passion for our work.
We have fun.
In 2020, A to Z hit another historical milestone by becoming 100% employee-owned. This would forever cement the culture of pride and ownership that makes A to Z Bus so special.
Hi, I'm Tracy, and I'm an owner.
I'm Eddie, and I'm an owner.
I'm Roger, and I'm an owner.
I'm Cole, and I'm an owner.
I'm Crystal, and I'm an owner.
I'm an owner. Soy un dueño.
And I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
Soy un dueño. I'm an owner.
I'm an owner. I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
Soy un dueño.
I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
I'm an owner. I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
Soy un dueño.
I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
I'm an owner.
I'm also an owner.
I'm also an owner.
I'm also an owner.
My name is Ruben, and I'm an employee owner.
Hi, I'm John Lander, President and CEO of A to Z Bus Sales, and I'm a proud employee owner.
A lot has transpired in over 45 years, but our story has just begun. Contact A to Z Bus Sales and partner with us to make the world a better place, one bus at a time.
Okay, I just have one more thing to announce. Don't forget to play the virtual conference games and make an appointment with your sponsors to get the maximum points possible to win fabulous prizes, including a $500 gift card of your choice. And we hope to see you this afternoon at lunch special, connecting the dots, ways public transportation can combat human trafficking. See you later. Have a great day.